Imagine if during a basketball match, one team's hoop was lined with magnets while the other's was not, and the basketball itself had a little magnet embedded within it. Both teams are of roughly equal skill, and let's say the audience and the players are aware of these magnets being used for one team. Every single shot toward the magnet-lined hoop that results in a successful score immediately raises an eyebrow and becomes inherently less impressive to everyone. And just like with any game, this kind of assist compresses the perceived ability gap between good and potentially great players in a team who no longer stand out or have good reason to push themselves to be better or exceptional. Because why bother training to be more precise than needed if the magnets are going to correct their mistakes? And of course, the other team, who doesn't have this aim assist helping their shots, are at a big disadvantage, and every score against them boils up an ever-increasing feeling of indignation. The spirit of competition and everything attractive about that journey to player and audience is lost. Perhaps for the first time in the history of VR shooters, we have an unprecedented occasion. A popular shooter game with a fully fledged flat-screen style aim assist. Contractor Showdown is the game, and if you've played it before, you'd easily be forgiven for not being aware of it helping you. Because the feature is hidden and included within the harmlessly named setting, Scope Stabilization, which is toggled on by default for all players. Seeing that name, what do you think it likely does? A reasonable and very logical guess would be that it makes your scopes more stable. More than likely through extra filtering of hand tremors while you're aiming through a scope. The naming itself is pretty clear, right? And based upon that, it's something you definitely want to keep on, because the natural hand tremors we experience from holding extremely lightweight VR controllers are not realistic or accurate to how we would tremor if we were holding a much heavier rifle in real life, as our VR avatar is. But despite the very direct naming that should not leave anything up to interpretation, scope stabilization is actually doing much more than just stabilizing scopes when you're aiming. Did you know it's also trying to stick to and track targets for you? Not unlike a soft aimbot, and it even tracks players behind cover. And did you know it's doing this for not just the scopes? If you want to try this yourself in-game, then go into Options, Control, and scroll down until you find Scope Stabilization. It should be enabled already if you haven't messed with the settings. Then adjust the motion smoothing slider to 6 or above so the tracking behavior is clear to observe. Now join a pre-game warm-up, put the 4x dot scope onto your weapon, aim toward an enemy player, and begin slowly dragging your aim over them side to side. Then watch how both the 4x and dot will slow down near and attempt to pull itself toward and try to stick to that target. And note how it is a significant effect. Try it at different ranges. It even works on extremely far targets and makes tracking them accurately an easy task. Finally, try slowly drifting your aim side to side over a building or obstruction you know an enemy player is near or behind, and watch the reticles still attempt to slow down, stick to, and track them through cover even though you can't see them. But now you know exactly where they are, because of the reticle slowing down. So aside from that obvious wall hack exploit, what exactly is my problem with this feature being used in a VR multiplayer modern-style shooter? Well, I have many. But before I explain them, it's important to understand the context in which aim assist was first created back in the day for flat-screen shooters, specifically those on console using a gamepad. The YouTuber Neril did a far more interesting and entertaining job explaining this than I could do now, in a video he made years ago discussing the Nintendo Wii and the rejection of motion controls over traditional inputs despite their large advancements in aiming.
You have like 100 muscles in the arm. You got the complete full range of motions, large movements, small movements.
You can make big swings from the elbow, or precise adjustments from the wrist. The range of movement afforded by this is huge compared to using your thumb to tilt a stick within a 1-inch radius, with a space for precise adjustment like aiming is a matter of centimeters. Because sticks are blunt and imprecise, developers have to deploy a lot of tricks to make it feel like you're aiming well. You can see the aim assist that moves your reticle onto an enemy, but there are hidden layers beyond that.
Don't even have to touch the right joystick. And then when I aim down the sights,
this little cross here that you see is actually where the bullets will bend towards. And as I go over him, you'll see it actually snaps to him. Magnetism basically means that we slow down your turning speed when you get close to an enemy. When you're inside of the magnetism cone, any movement that this guy does, your reticle will try and follow him.
Maybe you don't notice that it's helping that
Right.
much. Yeah, it just feels like you're that badass.
Yeah.
This is the reality of dual analog, an input method so poor that the game practically has to cheat on your behalf to make it work.
This is an informative and extremely entertaining video that still has plenty of relevance and parallels with VR input today. Do watch it, and all of his videos. He's an exceptionally talented creator and editor. So with what he showed in mind, it should be clear why VR motion control obviously does not need this kind of assist. It already realizes our intentions wonderfully. The damaging consequences of aim assist on an input which does not need it to realize our intentions are subtle and abstract, and requires one to adopt a bigger picture perspective. I'll try and break them down here. Firstly, aim assist can homogenize and compress player skill variants closer together. You, me, and others will hit shots we otherwise should have missed. The average player you encounter where a firefight might have involved a lot of dynamic variance and back and forth between you now has a higher chance of just being a generic, quick spray down like most others. A tense firefight of near misses with dramatic ups and downs, you know, as if you're fighting against a real, imperfect human being and not a bot, are now less likely to occur. Because with aim assist you cease only fighting against just the player's ability. There is now also an omnipresent algorithm constantly trying to interfere and correct you. Here's a hypothetical scenario. You and another player are engaged in a back-and-forth firefight. Neither of you have aim assist, though you are both using the typical VR features to help with stabilization like virtual stock and motion smoothing. But ultimately, your core accuracy remains dictated by your own ability. You score several hits on each other. One retreats, heals, the other pushes, then you defend, and so on. Always on the cusp of winning or defeat, but you both can't quite land those critical shots for various reasons because you are flawed human beings who are not acting optimally all the time. This exchange goes on for a while as you try to outplay each other until eventually you're at a stalemate because you've both run out of ammo. You and your opponent gradually coming to realize this and now having an innate respect for one another that can naturally develop from such an intimate, tense one-on-one conflict, proceed to find great amusement in this ending and decide to emerge from cover and declare a truce. Using the proximity chat and motion tracking in VR to wish each other a GG and laugh about the whole exchange and how you failed to kill each other. You then go on to add this player as a friend to later play in a squad with, and through the bond you forged from the original conflict, you now become allies going forward in this game and others. This story of how you met becoming a fond, memorable one for you to recall. With the kind of gameplay context Showdown offers, that scenario and an infinite number of other diverse, unique, distinctly human, error-prone scenarios could organically occur. This is a big draw of seeking to play against other human beings as opposed to CPU bots, is it not? The huge variable unpredictability which comes from our nature and how that manifests in moment-to-moment play always means we may be challenged and surprised in different ways with results we cannot reliably predict. This is typically what we find the most fun in things, the variance and unpredictability of it. Now, let's rewind that hypothetical battle, but this time add aim assist into the equation. As before, both players encounter one another and open fire. Some of the exchanges of gunfire which missed in the previous scenario now will turn into hits, as the game is continuously trying to correct and stick your aim toward the target. This interference is enough to tip the scales that one of you goes down in the initial exchange and is eliminated. One continues on, the other leaves the game. Scenario over. The chance for back and forth, dramatic moments, near misses, personality expression, unique play and skill diversity, the bond and joy of your flawed human natures interacting chaotically with one another, all of it that would have emerged is instead denied and transformed into a generic, average firefight exchange not dissimilar to fighting bots. All because of the aim assist. Of course, there are no guarantees. The former scenario might still happen, but is far more unlikely with how significant and ever-present the interference of the aim assist is. Alongside sometimes allowing players a success they otherwise wouldn't earn, compressing the average player skill variance into a more homogeneous blob of predictable outcomes, further exaggerating the highest and lowest extremes of a skill curve, and potentially holding back a player from naturally improving their skill over time, aim assist artificially altering outcomes can also result in something far more quietly destructive, which may not be so obvious to us at first examination. Its interference can actively hold back and punish a better marksman, denying them the success and status and identity they otherwise would naturally earn had no assist been interfering. But even more profoundly damaging than that, it can lead this player to believe they are worse than they actually are, and the other player better than they actually are. Here's another hypothetical scenario which I hope can illustrate this. Two players encounter each other head-on, player A and player B. Both have aim assist activated, but they are unaware of it helping them. They're at short to medium range, but still far enough to consider aiming rather than just point firing, and both begin to take aim at the same time while strafing perpendicular to one another. Let's say the first to hit their target will go on to win that engagement. Player A, overall, is the consistently better marksman than Player B, because Player A has more discipline to line up their aim before firing, but, as a consequence, takes a fraction of a second longer than Player B to line up on target before they do fire. Player B is not a terrible aim, but is more reckless and lacks the instinctual, considerate precision of Player A, preferring just to aim quickly in the general area toward the target and open fire, meaning he is slightly faster to ready the weapon, but often initially under or overshoots his target, and usually misses the first few shots before correcting himself. Excluding other random game variables, Player A should rightfully win this engagement against Player B most of the time. He has greater discipline and accuracy while only being very slightly slower at acquiring his target, while having a much higher chance to hit the first shot. But with aim assist barging its way into the equation, Player A does not win this engagement most of the time, or anywhere near as much as he otherwise would. His better instinctual accuracy, discipline, and calm that would usually grant him success in this scenario instead becomes a detriment due to the artificial interference. As the aim assist works in contrast to Showdown, aiming near an enemy increases friction, slowing down and stabilizing aim to help counteract inaccuracies such as overshooting your target. And on top of this, it will try to pull your aim point toward the target and track their movements. Hopefully you might be beginning to see how this kind of assist can hinder Player A, the more better and considerate marksman, yet greatly benefit Player B, the slightly faster but more reckless and less accurate reflex aimer. The friction and its sudden change of speed throws off Player A's natural target acquisition, slowing him down near the target and messing up his trained ability, so he spends extra time readjusting and compensating. Player B, on the other hand, has his more reckless aim compensated for by the friction, giving a higher chance that he'd land on target faster despite being more careless. What we see here is bad aim behavior getting rewarded and good aim behavior getting punished. The extra magnetizing the aim point does on top of the friction seems like it could go either way for Player A, helping or hindering depending on how he tries to compensate, whereas for Player B it feels more clean-cut on it being a clear help and granting him success he otherwise should not get. Player B has the consequence of their bad habits corrected or nullified by this kind of aim assist, suppressing further incentive for personal skill development, placing him within a perceived skill bracket he doesn't belong in, and what may be the worst consequence of all. He'll gain an inflated ego and be fooled by the game into believing he's a better player than he actually is. A seemingly harmless deception of accessibility which can unintentionally lead to frustration and confusion for him when transferring over to another shooter where he suddenly finds himself not performing as well, and in his ignorance of not knowing the aim assist was doing a lot of work for him, may then go on to blame that particular game's gunplay design for feeling wrong or bad, when in fact he's just being made to face the reality of his ability not being handheld anymore. Player A, on the other hand, having met many more failures in this scenario, can have the inverse psychology happen to him. A gradual demoralization that leads to the conclusion he's a worse player than he really is, and that others around him just suddenly seem to be that much more consistently faster and accurate at many ranges at a level he now can't compete with, gradually spiraling his attitude and mindset to lose confidence and thus perform worse, when in reality it's the game that's been screwing him over. Now, there are so many ways a game can implement aim assist that might alter whether the better player is more successful or not. I'm aware of and not disputing this, but it would be an endless conversation of endless variables, and my conclusion would still be the same. The artificial interference and altering of outcomes by aim assist should not be there at all if the input is already precise enough, which is certainly true for VR motion. Just turn it off then if it's such a problem, you say, assuming you can. Okay, so now you can enjoy a significant stability disadvantage at longer ranges, and every encounter from here on will be tinted with the constant niggling doubt in the back of your head of whether a lost battle and the perceived skill of another player was actually their own for you to respect and be impressed by, or that they only beat you because the game was doing a big part of the aiming for them. AKA, they didn't deserve the win. Every single encounter is now laced with doubt. The spirit of naturally fair competition is eroded. Can you really ever say good game anymore under these conditions? I mentioned before that VR controllers are extremely lightweight, and it's not reasonable to say players who don't want to use the aim assist should then have to put up with unrealistically unstable microtremors from the sensitive tracking. Motion smoothing and virtual stock are well-established and effective solutions to this problem in VR, though their implementations can vary in effectiveness on a per-game basis. You can choose to play without any of them, but most will be at a disadvantage due to the tremoring, especially for precise longer-range aiming that just becomes an absolute mess. Contractor Showdown includes these options alongside the aim assist, but with a very large catch. Its implementation of virtual stock desynchronizes your forward controller position and also locks your weapon rotation severely, so no blind fire or more free angling of your weapon when needed. And its motion smoothing option can't be used independently. It only applies when you turn on the aim assist, which is bizarre, and I'm really hoping this dependency is some kind of bug. So if you choose to only have the virtual stock enabled, you'll have a heavily rotation-restricted, yet still quite tremoring aim from no motion smoothing. And if you only want motion smoothing, tough luck. It won't function without the aim assist turned on. Assuming that's not a bug, it feels by design in Contractor Showdown that you're being pushed toward using the aim assist, else you're at a constant varying disadvantage versus those using it. And are they using it or not? Well, you can't ever know, unless you ask and they tell you. But chances are they probably will be. It's a logical assumption. It's a PvP game, and people want to eke out any advantage they can, usually. And therein creeps the doubt and erosion of the spirit of fair competition once more. Did that player who defeated you truly outplay you and earn their victory? A player participating in honest and healthy competition, casual or serious, should not be having to contend with these thoughts. Why are sports and competitive games, from world class all the way down to school playgrounds, attractive to us in the first place, and have been for thousands of years? My take on this is because the only major variables are the fellow humans participating, or at least it should be. These variations in people, their biology and psychology can be vast, and that's why it's interesting to play and watch for us, and why we tend to divide into clearly definable groups of ability, such as gender, age, weight, etc. Everyone understands and is playing by the same rules, and we intuitively understand the kinds of effort and skills needed to participate in a particular activity. It's a competition of the human spirit within a set confine of external limitations everyone has agreed to follow, aka a game. This is why we can be so engaged with the process, seeing how the players express, overcome, fail, excel, surprise, endure, and so on. It all comes from the human element, because that's what's relatable and thus compelling to you and me. If she or he can do that, maybe I could too. And if we can't for whatever reason, we can at least appreciate, respect, and admire what it's taken for them to perform as they do. But also, we can learn humility from what we can't do when comparing to others, and perhaps, maybe, rise to the challenge of trying to overcome that. It's a story, a journey, which we manifest in active play with one another. And we humans live and die on our stories. We can't seem to exist consciously and well without some kind of narrative framework to guide and organize us at all times. And so I believe that artificially interfering with the sanctity of our sacred process for friendly play and competition is not as harmless as it may seem. It's just a game, what does it matter? Yeah, so is society. So is romance, so are daily communication rituals and habits, so are the languages we speak, so is our music, the culture we embody and enact. All of them arbitrary games we've created with set rules and structures and patterns which we all have acquiesced to since birth, some more or less than others. All of these abstract creations of ours can only sustain their legitimacy and integrity so long as enough of us agree to play by the same rules. Our collective agreement to play the same game is what constitutes a country and culture. What begins as a necessity for survival through forced organization and collaboration with each other gradually progresses on, in times of safety, to a ritualistic rehearsal and reminder of this through the many games we create. We humans never stop needing to reaffirm, temper, trial, and compete with one another in various ways to check we are all still agreeing to play the same game. We intrinsically understand these are important and meaningful for us. We even understand and celebrate the significant impact play can have on us through our arts, sports, and competition in all forms and levels, all the way down to the very first years of our lives. Did you ever stop to consider how we intuitively just know that we should be encouraging children to play as the best means of healthy learning and social development from the earliest age possible, particularly physically, and that we should turn as much as we can into a form of fun, structured game or activity for them? How do we just know that's what's best? And do we suddenly just lose such a deeply ingrained nature of learning and expression through fun activities once we cross an arbitrary age threshold where play is less and less needed and more stigmatized the older we get? Or perhaps do we naturally grow out of the training wheels and manufactured outcomes of play we get as young children and transfer our deep lifelong need for meaningful, healthy play with one another into more complex forms which we manifest in so many expressions, like this game, and into some not-so-healthy forms of play when we take it too far, like a binge-drinking culture? It's just a game. Right. And this means a hell of a lot to us on many levels in society, so that's why it and the choices that risk compromising the spirit of our meaningful play should matter to us. We collect, learn from, and carry these experiences and attitudes with us through life, and they help contribute to a clearer idea of who we are and what we are capable of, affecting how we deal with all that comes after in life. So best we not delude each other in that case then, eh? The inaccurate self-identity this can contribute will just make it that much harder to orient ourselves well and deal with reality when it eventually comes knocking for us all. A personal thank you to those who choose to support the channel. You are literally the only reason why this channel continues to exist. Thank you very much for your attention and sticking with me to the end. You take care.